Anthony, great to see you. Thank you so much again for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to this interview. Why don't we start off with a little intro on your end, who you are, your background story, your team. That would be awesome.
I've been in research and development and systems engineering pretty much my entire career. And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started several companies, sold a couple, lost a couple, usual story of the entrepreneur. And this one, however, Synchronous has been the monster project, and really comes back to me as an athlete. I'm a big guy for metrics and testing, and I realized that most of the testing is done in a lab. But when you look at human performance of any kind, it's all done in a lab. And like, we're not hamsters. We don't run on wheels, right? If you want to see true performance of a human, you have to get them out into the real world. But all R&D is very lab-centric, and labs are very lab-centric. What this should be is human-centric, right? The human should be the lab, not in a lab, right? You don't put a human on a treadmill if you want to understand how good the runner they are. You have to send them out into the real world. But there's no technology, or wasn't until we started working on it. There's no technology that you could put a mobile lab on a human and then send them out into the real world. It just didn't exist. So that's what we have spent the last 7 years developing from scratch, a research and development platform for human performance that is mobile and completely innocuous, and can also deliver that data in real time as it's being generated. So you could be the coach halfway around the world watching your athlete. You could be a researcher watching your group of humans doing their thing from anywhere. So that's the ethos of Synchronous.
That's very cool. And it's been awesome watching your company's growth. I guess maybe it sort of leads us into the next question as like, where did Vault come into this? What led you to Vault?
I'd love to give you a great story, that it was actually just completely fluke finding you. But I'm a researcher, so I dug into what you were. I mean, I was working with TD for almost 20 years, and I felt a need for a change, but I wasn't going to change unless I really knew what I was getting myself into. So finding you was quite fluke, but choosing was very deliberate.
Awesome. And were there any maybe like specific challenges that you faced with TD that made it easier to make a decision on Vault?
All the things. A banking system that hasn't changed in 50 years really is not interested in entrepreneurial excellence. And that's not to discredit TD in that sense. It's just not their business, right? If you have $1 billion, TD would like to talk to you, right? If you have $5,000 in the bank, you might as well go to personal banking, right? Like, that's just TD. Also, their systems really are archaic. I mean, if you want to get an open up account at TD, you still have to bring in paperwork, and they take your paperwork and put it away in a file room. And I had that conversation with TD directly. I was like, this is crazy. Like, what? They're like, oh, well, this is just the system. So needless to say, it's a system in a need for a revolution. And it was one of the things that attracted me to Vault. Was I looked at this, I'm like, wow, this is, it's taking aircraft equivalent. This is a scratch built aircraft, right? From the ground up. Let's just start and reimagine a whole new thing the way it should be. And now, whether that was your target or not for entrepreneurs and startups, it just works very well in fact of itself. So that was another really big issue. CD just isn't the fit. It doesn't represent startups well. It doesn't value them well. And as a result, I never looked back. I closed the account. I honestly have never looked back.
No, that's for sure. It's great feedback. And you said something there that was really interesting as far as not looking after the little guy, for lack of a better word. Did you ever come across like maybe a fee or a price that you were like in your head, how does this make sense? And if you could quantify, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Continuously. I mean, monthly fees were obnoxious, even for the smallest plans. Once again, big business wouldn't care, right? Because, oh, what's another 50 grand in fees, right? We make $1 billion a year. And every little nugget, every little thing, you wanted to file a GST return, it was $12 service charge. Like, you know what modern day banking reminds me of when I talk about like the big five? It's like being on a cruise ship, okay? You get in, you pay your fee to get in, and then they just nickel and dime you every single day until your $1,500 cruise costs you $6,000, right? And that's exactly how business banking's done today. Bring you in for X, and then just every transaction, a wire, $45. We had an NSF on checks, which are like a nightmare. It wasn't even our fault. And also it spiraled into almost $400 in fees off of one NSF, because basically what happened was a large check that was supposed to clear wasn't our fault, just something got broken. And then a whole bunch of stuff came in behind it, and TD hit us for every single thing that didn't clear. And we were over $400 in fees because of one NSF, which they charged us $48 for. And for a startup, that's a big deal, right? And just all the other issues that came along with that. So yeah, that was one of the final straws. That happened shortly before I moved to Vault.
Yeah, no, definitely. And appreciate you sharing that story. To switch gears a little bit, would love to use that into a transition of what's Vault been like since you started using the platform, and how does it compare?
Well, I mean, to be clear cut, we don't spend money on Vault. We make money on Vault. I mean, I know how to be clear to view that. It's the polar
Definitely.
opposite of the TD banking system. And I love to see that monthly deposit and go, wow, look at that. That's not fees, that's income. And I'd say to stick to the numbers, that's the big one. I'd also say that with investors and working with kind of the vendors we're working with right now, we've had to send some pretty big transfers, and investor we made a deposit, and being able to just pull up the electronic information on a nicely crafted PDF and just send that across made me feel very professional. And when we sent transfers, there was actually a real problem with one of the transfers, but I was able to quickly find the verification, push the buttons, send it to them, and they're like, wow, this is detailed. Like, I never got that from TD. I never even had the ability to get any of those things from TD. It was very clunky, not very slick, with lots of reporting. So our image to not only our investors, but the people we deal with, I mean, we look like a much bigger company than we are, right?
Yep.
Which is very useful when it comes to gaining traction.
That's really awesome to hear. And it sounds like the PDF specifically is making your company seem, as I'm sure it is, extremely professional. Taking that question and maybe turning it into, you've been running this business for about 7 years. As you scale and continue to scale, can you see yourself staying on Vault?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no reason I could see us leaving. I don't see anything that was within the existing system today that would limit our ability to scale. And in fact, the opposite. We get regular emails from your engineering team on the continuous stream of new features that are coming out almost monthly. I don't expect that to slow anytime soon. So I'd say we're more in a position of keeping up with you versus you keeping up with us.
That's super great feedback. And you also mentioned a little bit earlier in the discussion how startups can see great use of it, entrepreneurs can see great usage of Vault. Who specifically, or maybe even in a broader sense, would you recommend Vault to? Like, what types of Canadian businesses?
So somebody that is starting from zero, you're a great fit, because once again, the investment is minimal to zero. And with all the external connectivity that you have, connecting to zero, things like that, also very important when you're starting from zero, that you automate as much as you can, because there's only you and maybe one or two people. So that's already handled. The other type of business, everybody that doesn't need checks, old school business, old school banking. One thing that you just have to account for, if you're a very digitally driven business, if your income comes through digital means, if you can pay all your bills. And that's one of the things I really have to give kudos to you guys for. When I started with you, we had very limited ways to accept and send payments digitally. And I was willing to deal with that because I assumed that you guys would catch up, and you have, right? So once again, that's taken a lot of limitations away from how we do business. But if you need cash and checks, well, it's not your fit, but then if you need cash and checks, you should probably have a look at your business. That's just more inefficiencies in there, right?
No, definitely. And appreciate the kind words. And we will keep our foot on the gas pedal as far as building out new features. So some of those are definitely down the line. The last two questions for you here, super easy ones. First, how would you rate Vault out of 10?
I have to give you a 9 because I'd love to be able to withdraw cash with my card when I'm traveling. And in the US, that's a kind of a thing. People like cash. And that's honestly, sincerely, it isn't a plug. It's literally the only thing I can think of. Okay, maybe there's the other thing, instead of getting a 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, the search algorithm, when you're trying to pull up transactions and you're selecting your date range, is a bit weird. it works with you. That's
Okay.
it. I mean, transparently, like I'm on Vault every single day. And those are literally the only two things I'm like, damn, that's it.
That's great feedback.
Of
Appreciate
course.
the transparency. A 9
Yep.
is an awesome answer. And then to maybe cap this off, what would you rate the banks out of 10, the traditional incumbent banks in Canada?
Oh, 3. I mean, in terms of our fit, the only reason we had them is because we had to, not because it was a good relationship. And I say 3, not just once again try to slam them. It was just, if they had been a product that we didn't need, I would never have signed up, right? And I would have been gone within 2 years versus 20. And once again, I'm not slagging the banks. It's just not a good fit.
For sure. Hey, well, Anthony, really appreciate you answering all those questions. Being a customer, it's been awesome to work with you over a little over a year, I believe now. So look forward to continuing to have these conversations, and thank you again so much for taking the time.
No problem.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.